Hey everybody, and welcome to another tutorial in APA. We are using, in this series, LibreOffice, which I've got up here, and Open Office, which is very similar Office programs, Office productivity suites that come not only with spreadsheets, as you can see in this image, but also Word productivity presentations, other kinds of Office productivity apps. You download the whole thing, and it comes with all of these as opposed to individual apps like it is with the case with Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft Office. So that's what we're doing in these, and this complements what I've done previously with Excel, Google, Apple, because there are some users out there that use these free programs to work with data and to make presentations. And I think it's useful to know how to use the options because there are a lot. It's very robust programs for being free and open source. It's amazing. They have a lot to offer, but it can be unwieldy if you're not familiar with these apps. And yes, most of the people that come to my channel are looking for Excel or Google Sheets, one of the two. But there is a subset of people who enjoy working with Apple iWork or working with LibreOffice or Open Office. And LibreOffice and Open Office, again, are similar enough to where the process that I work with in LibreOffice applies to Open Office and vice versa. There are a few small, minor differences, but for the most part, it's cosmetic and not necessarily going to impact your data visualization. In this final episode of the graph APA style graph series, we're going to be doing a scatterplot. So I have data from my previous sets of scatterplot videos, Sheets, Excel, Apple numbers, and we're going to use the same data. It's going to be the same, almost completely linear piece of information, but we are going to make a scatterplot out of it. So, and of course, like with the other videos, this file will be made available in the description section down below. So if you want to download it and work with this exact file, or change the data here with your own data, and it will automatically update the graph. Shh, don't tell your teacher if you're doing this for a class, but this is how you want to do it. Okay. We are going to want to make a scatter plot. We've got 3 columns here. We can ignore column A because column A is just the participant number. Not necessary. When I created this data set, I asked ChatGPT to make it for me, and it included the participant number. So, we're going to do it. It doesn't really matter. What we do want to grab is age and score. So we're going to highlight all the way down to the 50 subjects that we have. Okay. So row 1 all the way to 51. Whoops. There we go. We're going to grab that, and we're going to go up to chart, and we're going to go insert chart here. We're going to click on that. It's going to open up our chart wizard. Of course, it defaults to a bar graph, and we don't want that, right? Because it's putting bars for age and score. Although you can clearly see that we're going to have connection here, right? The bigger the blue bar, the bigger the red bar, right? But no, we don't want that. We want a XY scatter. The XY scatter is either going to be points only, points and lines. We don't want points and lines. We don't want lines only, and we don't want these 3D lines, right? We just want the points. And of course, the size of our dots, squares in this case, are really big, so they're kind of overlapping and it kind of looks gross. So we're going to modify that in our appearance settings, which is not something that I've done, that I've messed around with in the previous ones, because even in the line graph, it's not super important how big it is, right? The lines are what are important here. But here, the dots are the squares. So we got to make these smaller and a little bit more legible to show that these are individual points that don't overlap quite like this. So I've gone through the chart wizard in every video, and so I'm not going to spend too much time until we get to chart elements. Just to suffice to say that we can finish and keep everything how it is, or actually make some changes on each of these 4 steps. Of course, step 1, we needed to change the chart type. There was no 2 ways about it. There's also a bubble graph, which I think is quite interesting. Weird though. I'm curious to see. Oh, this is in the way. It looks like, oh god, okay, that's not great. Let's go back to dots. It did switch the order of them, which is weird. What happened here? There we go. For some reason, the bubble graph changed the way that the data was being read. Okay, which made the scatterplot weird. Okay, let's go to, we can click on that, or click next. We're going to ignore that. Data series and columns. First row is label. We're actually going to get rid of this label in the legend, so don't worry about that. It's using the Y variable, the Y variable in column C as the label for these dots. I mean, it is true. That is their score, but these are technically age by score numbers. So we are going to get rid of that. You can also uncheck that, and it should get rid of it. Oh, it just names it column C. All right, well, whatever. Let's make it score. Hit next. See, again, the name comes from this. The X values come from column B, as you can see, and then Y values come from column C, as you can see here. We don't need to make any changes here because it's all good by default. Chart elements, we do not want the legend. Let's get rid of the legend because score is not necessary. We also don't want the the Y-axis display grids. Excel does both horizontal and vertical grid lines for scatter plots. Luckily, LibreOffice only does the Y-axis, and you can easily uncheck that box, and they disappear. I think if you were using this scatter plot to find values, you'd probably be using a ruler, and getting the exact values, or you have the data like you do right here. Like, unnecessary to have the grid lines to really do much of anything, because really what we're interested in when we look at scatterplots, especially from a statistical standpoint in a social science class like psychology or sociology or history or something like that, is, or even biology or chemistry, is the shape, right? And this is clearly a linear shape. It's very, I mean, that's what happens when you ask ChatGPT to make data. All right, so let's go ahead and put our labels in for x-axis and y-axis. We know the x-axis is age, so we're just going to put that in there. And we know the y-axis is score. Score, it can be anything you want. Score out of 100, right? So let's do that, out of 100. Done. That's why I like using these labels out the box, and then all we have to do is change their size. Okay, so there you go. There's your basic scatter plot, but we do need to make some fixes, right? So we're going to make changes to the size of the fonts on both x and y axes. We're going to get rid of this line around the edge called the wall, the chart wall. And we're going to make the lines darker, the axis lines darker, black to be sure. And then in here, we are going to make these actual squares into dots, and we are going to make them smaller. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to do the options that you have for scatter plots, which is like add a trend line. And so we can then modify that trend line. So let's go ahead and make some of these aesthetic changes. You can click on the thing. You can, when you click on the chart, you can click on and it'll show you what you're working with. If you're working with that chart, it'll give you the boundary on the outside. Let's go ahead and go to chart wall and just remove that. I keep doing that. We want none. Okay, it's going to get rid of the border around that. It's the border are our axes. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to go to click on age and go to this format selection button. And we are going to go to font because that's the only thing we need to do. Liberation Sans in LibreOffice is the default. It's pretty good, sans serif font, but Arial's good in 3 important ways for data visualization. One, it's a sans serif font, so there are no flourishes at the ends of letters and characters. So that's good. It makes it more easily readable, so you're not distracted by the serifs themselves. 2, the kerning between the characters, so the spacing between individual characters is such that you can see from a distance that each letter is distinct from the letter next to it. Even if you have 2 L's or even an L and an I next to each other, of course, Arial itself kind of has that with the R and the I. The spacing allows us to keep them, to notice that they are, separate letters from a distance. And then the third thing is that Arial has been shown to help with reading with people with dyslexia. It's not a dyslexic font. Those exist. It is just a traditional font that is more useful to folks with dyslexia than, say, Times New Roman, right? We don't want to make our graph look too fancy. We just want the basics, and Arial fits that bill. Finally, with font size, you want the font to be readable at any distance, whether you're doing a slide deck presentation from a projector, you have it on a poster board in a conference poster session, or any other in a manuscript graph, you want it to be readable. 14-point font is a good medium between too small and too big that it takes up too much of the chart element, right? So 14 is my go-to. Of course, this is obviously a conventional choice as opposed to a prescribed choice in APA style. So we're going to do that. We're going to make that big age. We're going to do that with score as well. Okay, I'm going to move that up. You know what? I say this every time. Let's make the change first, and then I'll Arial, and then 14. You can type in this and change the number itself, right? So let's go ahead and make this a little bit smushier. Okay, I am going to elongate it, and let's go up a little bit. There we go. All right. So we have 0 to 100. Luckily, it puts 100 at the top, and that's because we have a few values that just hit 90, and so it's good that it put 100 there. We don't actually need to modify it because it's a score out of 100. Perfect. So we just need to modify these axes, change the font size, font type, and make the line black. So let's click on that, and let's go to Format Selection. It takes us to where we were previously, which is great. So we go to Arial, and we're also going to make this 14. It's going to make the numbers really big. But before we leave, we want to go to Line, and we want to make sure that the line color is not this light shade of gray, but black. And then we're going to hit OK because we don't actually need to do anything with numbers. We don't want any font effects. Label, this is modifying the way the label appears. The line we just changed. Positioning, we just want the numbers next to their tick marks. You can have cross tick marks, but both clicked inner only or by default outer only. And then scale, you can change the minimum, the maximum, and all of that in the intervals. So our minimum, so where the y-axis crosses, is going to be 10 years old. And that's because we don't have anybody that is less than, I think, 18. So that's fine. You could start it at 0 if you wanted to, if you uncheck this and be like, well, I guess people can be just born. I mean, obviously 0 is not technically an age, or, minutes, days, months old before you're a year old, which is how we measure age here, right? Well, I could put age in years, but I think people understand what we're meaning there. So we can do that and hit OK. The major interval requires a positive number. Check your input. Oh, I checked the wrong minimum. That's the one I wanted. Major interval was 10. it was 10 for both, and so I made a goof there. So let's set this to 0. That's the one I wanted. That's what I was just saying with the 0. There we go, 0 to 70. It smushed everything a little bit, right? So you have a little bit of dead space over here. So it really all depends, and you can see that there's only somebody 18.5 years old, right? So 18 and a half years old. So you can cut it off at 15 if you wanted to. Let's do the same thing with the y-axis format selection. Bring up the y-axis plot. 0 is a potential score on this test, so is 100, so our scale is good. Positioning, again, we can have cross ticks, inner ticks, or by default, outer ticks. You can also have no ticks. I think I failed to say that in all my videos. You can, because they're checkboxes, you can have no ticks if you want to. The line, we want to be black. There we go, black. And then the only other thing we need in here is to change the font to Arial, 14-point font. Click OK. There we go. Still have some dead space here, but kind of smushed it a little bit. And as you can see, we smushed this, and it kind of put all of the, again, the squares all up into each other. And we don't want that. So we got to finish off this visual aspect here. So we're going to deal with these data points. To deal with these data points, you can click on them. You can see them all selected, and we can double click, and we can get that data series up, or you can go up to the choose data series score, and then hit the format selection. So first things first is the primary y-axis is what we are aligning the data to, so it fits over here. Plot options, continuous line, technically, if there were any missing values, which means missing cells, it would ignore those as a continuous line. You could also leave a gap. You would not want on a scatter plot to assume 0 because it would put the point down here somewhere, or like down here. We don't want that. And then line is what we need to actually change. So by default, the icon is a square, okay? And it's this shade of blue. That's fine. So let's go ahead and make it circle, because circles tend to be the symbol of choice. The dot, we'll say. For some reason, my LibreOffice doesn't like to give me the selection right away. So again, it won't change until we're done, but we do need to reduce the width and the height. By default, the ratio to make this a perfect circle. So of course it's a circle, so width and height doesn't really, it's kind of weird, right? It's basically choosing this is the radius, and this is the 0 degree horizontal line radius, 0.25 centimeters from the origin out this way, and then the height would be the 90-degree line origin vertically, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the size every time I change this, right? It remains a sphere, but it's getting smaller each time. So let's do a millimeter here. Let's do a radius of a millimeter circle. And when we click on OK, it will make that change. And as you can see, oh wait, it changed it to red squares? No, it's because that's the default selection appearance for those circles, and it's just slightly bigger than a millimeter. So there we go. I think that looks a lot better, right? It shows individual points, although there is some overlap over here. It's because those two data points are really close to each other, right? And it shows like the variation in some of these off of the imaginary line, right? This one, kind of this one here. So that's what a scatter plot here would look like with this very linear, made-up correlation here. This correlation is like 0.99, by the way. So yeah, you can clearly see that. One last thing you can add to scatter plots is a line of best fit, okay? A trend line, okay? So we're going to right-click on one of these dots so we can get the appropriate menu that allows us to add the trend line. There is no other way to add the trend line as far as I can tell from these buttons up here. So even if we go into, like, I think this is the chart wizard button. Yeah, the chart type, it brings that up. I think, yeah, just brings up that. So there's not much you can do as far as adding a trend line with any of this information, because that's data ranges, it's titles, it's the legend, grid lines, and then modifying the axes themselves. So we have to select it from here. And then we have the insert trend line, because we're going to get the regression line here. So we're going to insert trend line. Okay, so it pulls this up, and here we have it. It's nice in there. It's continuous line. I like that. I don't know why Excel's like, here, have a dotted line. That doesn't make any sense, right? So it's continuous line, and it is the same color as my data series. Of course, you're seeing red squares because we have the data selected. I would suggest black, regardless of what your dots look like, as a way to contrast whatever dots that you have. Black is, generally speaking, the color that works in all cases. It doesn't mess with any colorblind people. It doesn't mess with printing in only black and white. It doesn't mess with typesetting journals who will only print in grayscale, which sounds weird now, but yeah, there are journals that still only do grayscale. It's cheaper, so you know they still print out their journals and mail them to people or get them in the hands of libraries and such. They're going to charge you more for color. So I would just choose black. Now this line is not very thick. It's a thickness of 0 inches, and unfortunately, we can only move in tenths of an inch. I don't know why they don't do point thickness like Excel does. That would be a lot easier, be that as it may. So if we click this button up to 0.2, that's how thick it would be. I think 0.1. Can you do 0.15? No, it just goes up to 0.2. Okay, so let's do 0.14. Nope, just 0.1. So it rounds up or rounds down based on what you choose. Okay, you can and depending on how the trend line works, you can or it looks, I should say, you can change the transparency because it will either sit on top or below, and you might want to change the transparency of your dots too. This is why color contrasting also works, so you don't have to mess with transparency and make sure it's the exact right kind. So that was the line options. Really, just change it black, maybe make it a little bit thicker in LibreOffice. We do have some options, however, for what kind of line it is. Of course, by default, it's going to be a linear, and in a scatter plot, that's really what we're looking for. But you do have logarithmic, exponential, power, polynomial to what degree, and then moving average to what period and what kind of moving average. You can name the trend line if you had a legend up here. So when I did my dissertation, I had trend lines, but also had lines themselves. So I had up and down zigzags for a trend analysis, and then the regression line to show you the overall trend. So it was up and down, up and down, up and down, and then the overall trend. So in my legends, and then I also had multiple data series in a single graph, right? Which is something else you could do. That's super advanced excelling. That's super advanced graph making. But if you needed that, you can put the trend line name in here and it'll show up wherever you have your legend. And then you can increase the distance of this trend line, extrapolate forward and extrapolate backwards. I'm actually going to add, let's add in, let's go 5 on either side. Yeah, let's go 5 on either side to see. You can also force the intercept where it would cross the y-axis. You can show the equation on the graph, which you can modify. This is cool. You can modify the y and x variable name. So I can put in here, x variable name is age, and then I can put the y variable here is score, and that will show up in the equation when I hit OK. And then the last thing you can do is show the coefficient of determination, which is r squared. Basically shows you how much of the variance between age and score is shared, right? So how much the variance, the differences in ages here is shared with the score. And of course, it's going to be very high because the correlation value is 0.99, 1 being the highest, 0.99, and so you square 0.99, and you basically get 0.91 or whatever, 0.81, yeah, something like that. So I'm going to click on that just to show you what it looks like when you hit that. And so you hit X, and it gives you this massive piece of information. You can see my extrapolation all the way through. I love that. But as you can see, this kind of works. This kind of works. Too bad you can't modify the yeah, you can't modify the size of this. I would actually, funny thing is, I would click on this and go to font, and I would make this a lot smaller. I'd make this like 7 point. Oh, and it's also Liberation Sans. Let's change that to Arial. There we go. And so we've got our R square, 0.98. Sorry, I don't know why I said it was going to be like 0.91. 0.98, almost 0.99 basically. And then so for every age year increase, so from like 18 to 19, you multiply by 1.2 and then add 16. Add 16.66, and that is the predicted score. I probably should have put like predicted score or something like that. But that's how the equation works here, right? I will say you don't need this information for APA style. All of the rest of this suffices. If you wanted to throw this in there, that's fine too. But this is a LibreOffice scatterplot with a regression trend line. Let's look at how this works in OpenOffice, and I guarantee you it's going to be extremely similar. So I'm just going to go through the process here. Okay. So we have the OpenOffice calc, right? So we're going to choose age and score, and we're going to scroll down to 50, and we're going to go to the chart one. Again, by default, it's like, oh, you want a bar graph with all that information? No, we want an XY scatter, and we're not going to change anything else about it. And as you can see, it's those thick squares again. Back through, data series, it's fine. We can leave out all that. Data range and data series, we don't have to change anything, but let's go to chart element, turn off the legend, turn off the y-axis display grids. Let's put age, again, and just to show you in years, okay, score out of 100. So you can do that if you want to. I know it's different. You can come in and change this any way that you want to. Go in there. Boom. Now OpenOffice defaults to Arial. So we don't necessarily need to make a ton of changes here to this graph. I'm just going to bring this. There we go. Yeah. So we do want to get rid of the chart wall. So we're going to click on chart, format selection, delete this wall, hit none. Okay. Okay. Get rid of the chart wall. Now let's start making our size and axis changes. So I'm going to click on U. I'm going to go to format selection, and we are going to hit font. Arial is there, but I want it to be 14. You don't need to do anything else along here, borders, area, transparency, or alignment. Change that. I'm going to click on U, format selection, Arial, 14, hit OK. Boom, there it is. So let's do the x-axis now, format selection. It is Arial, but we want it to be, oops, too far, 14. We do need to make a few more changes here, as we did in the previous one. Don't need font effects, don't need numbers, don't need to change anything with the label, but we do need to change the line. We do need to change it to black. Black is here up at the top. Okay, there we go. Positioning. Nothing that we need to do here. We want inner or outer interval tick marks, that kind of thing. And scale is automatic, but we will change our minimum to 0 just to be in line with the LibreOffice graph that I made. Okay, and we're gonna hit OK. There we go. 0 to 100 again. Some dead space, but oh well. So we're gonna click on this, the y-axis, format selection. Make sure it says y-axis up here. Scale, again, nothing we need to change about the scale because it knows that 100 is the top just based on this last data point here of 89 something. Positioning, we don't really need to change anything here. Again, major tick marks, inner, outer, both or none. The line we want is continuous, but we also want it to be black. Okay, and then no need to deal with labels, numbers, or font effects, but we do want to change Arial to 14 and then hit OK. Awesome. So we do that. Okay, and so our graph is almost done. We just need to modify these points here. So we right-click on them, and we are going to add format the data series, right? So interesting that OpenOffice uses green as its indicator, as its indicator on what you're focused on, right? We don't need to change anything in options, but we do want to change the line, right? So right now it's a 0.25 square. 0.25 centimeter square, right? Quarter centimeter square. We don't want that. We want to grab our symbol. We want it to be circles. And I think what we do, we did a millimeter radius. Yeah, there we go. If you change these, it will make it an oval, of course. If you uncheck keep ratio and you change these, it will make it an oval. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but some people like to watch the world burn, sure. We hit OK, right? And of course, they're not green squares. It's just I have this selected. So before I unselect them, I'm going to right click and go to Insert Trend Line. This trend line is a little bit different than the one we just made in LibreOffice. As you can see, the intercept is being forced right here. We don't necessarily want that. So we're going to look at the line first. Like I said, we kind of want it to be black to be different from the dot colors. That's what I like. And of course, we're dealing here with a situation of using inches. So let's just use a 0.01 inch thick bar. Okay. If you grabbed out a if you grabbed out a ruler, would that be, I guess maybe it's 0.01 inch thick if you were to print it out. Okay. So there's the line color. Okay, we do have to go to type. As you can see, there are fewer options in OpenOffice than there are in LibreOffice. I did say the process is very much the same, but there are some differences. LibreOffice has a few more options. So if I were to give you my suggestion, I would say download LibreOffice for your platform. Windows, Mac, OS, Linux, any of them. I would say LibreOffice has the closest to Excel that you're going to find, even closer than Numbers, Apple's Numbers, and even closer to Excel than even Google Sheets. I understand Google Sheets is super easy to use, but if you want a suite full of options, LibreOffice is where you go. So that would be my ranking, actually. I would go Excel, LibreOffice, OpenOffice, Numbers, Google Sheets. Yes, Google Sheets is really option poor. And the fact that you can't do error bars, custom error bars in it is a real big problem in my mind. So we don't have as many options as we did previously. So it is forcing, of course, we have fewer regression types that we can actually do, but it's forcing at the intercept, which is, of course, extrapolating down from our lowest value to 0, and it extrapolates to the end of the graph. So we can't specify that like we can do in LibreOffice, but at least it gives us a line that is beyond the data itself, which is not something you can do in other spreadsheet suites. So of course we're going to do linear, but you have the choice of logarithmic, exponential, and power if you need it. And then we have, of course, show equation and show coefficient of determination. It's only going to use x and y. It's probably going to show us a lot of the decimal points afterward, but I'm going to do it in any case, just to show you what it looks like. And then we're going to hit OK to show those things, and there you go. Yeah, so we couldn't specify in this what f of x is, what the function of x is versus x. It's the same values, and r squared is the same. Of course, we can format the selection to be smaller, so let's go to font and change that to 7, like I said. Already defaulted to Arial, but it makes it a little bit smaller. It puts it exactly where I wanted it to go. And it made the line black, and here we go. It follows that linear trend, as you can see. And most of the points are basically either on the line or mostly touching the line. So there you go. That is how you do Scatterplot in LibreOffice and OpenOffice, APA style, with regression lines. If you have any comments, suggestions, questions, or other feedback, please leave that in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching this video series and this video. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.